Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, dear students. My name is Harald Badinger. I'm Vice Rector for Financial Affairs and Campus Management, and on behalf of the whole WU's Rectors Council, I would like to welcome you to today's edition of the event series WU Matters, WU Talks. This event series has been in place for more than 5 years now, with its goal to make economic and societal topics of high relevance accessible to the interested public. Each of the 11 departments of WU organizes one of these event evenings throughout the year. And today it is the Department of Management that has taken over the design of the program, focusing on the topic sexual harassment in organizations. Usually I try to keep my opening statements short and light and entertaining. Tonight I maybe want to say a few words more, as this topic is anything but light and entertaining. Specific data for Austria, particularly from the survey Gender-Based Violence Against Women and Other Forms of Interpersonal Violence that Statistics Austria conducted between 2020 and 21, shows that roughly 750,000 women in Austria have experienced sexual harassment in their workplace. This accounts for more than a quarter of all women who have been employed at least once. This is a significant number, of course, and what is even worse, we do know that sexual harassment is often not reported out of pressure, out of disbelief, out of shame, an organizational culture that makes it really hard for the victims to speak up. But not hearing of an incident, not speaking about it, or not listening does, of course, not mean that it did not happen. No institution is immune against misbehavior of its members. No institution is immune against the occurrence of sexual harassment, and this is certainly also true for university. Hence, it is the responsibility of each institution to do its best to prevent the occurrence of sexual harassment. So what does WU do about it? By large, 3 things. First of all, we try to create an environment that is open and transparent, and where we try to learn from incidents and make sure that there are checks in place so that this does not happen again or is prevented in the first place. Second, we try to create an environment where victims and witnesses can feel safe in reporting incidents. And third, we try to openly talk about sexual harassment in different ways for different audiences in different formats, like tonight, so that it is known that victims will be heard and supported. We do this through supervisors, the occupational health services, the personnel office, the disability commissioners and their deputies, the Equal Opportunities Committee, the administrative and academic staff council, the WU Ombuds Office for Students, the WU branch of the Austrian Students' Union. And last but not least, through a strong WU community that is empowered and asked not to look away, to speak up, to support each other and to protect each other from harmful conduct, from abuse of power, from inappropriate behavior. It is our joint job and our joint responsibility to help and to make the right choices in our individual capacities, as leaders, as supervisors, as professionals, as much as colleagues and friends. I wish you a very interesting evening with interesting discussions, and for a further introduction into the topic and also the panelists participating, I would like to hand over the word to Marie-Therese Klaes, professor at the Department of Management. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice Rector Badinger, for these words. And yes, it is not a fun topic, but I think we have a lot of panel members here who can shed different lights, different perspectives on the topic and give us some answers also to the questions that we all have. So I would like to introduce the panel. Miss Anna Belen Amil, could you come up here? Yes, and sit over there. She works at the Central European University, where she is a Gender Equality and Diversity Officer, but she is also a representative of UNICEF. Yeah? She, of course, is promoting equal opportunities at her university, at the Central European University, and eliminating direct and indirect discrimination based on anything you can imagine. She has a degree in women's and gender studies and is a clinical psychologist, graduated at the University of Buenos Aires. And also participated in several EU-funded projects supporting promotion of equality in research and academia, for example. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, Anna. The next person I would like to introduce is Cornelia Amon-Conrad. She has been working for the Austrian Ombud for Equal Treatment since 2006. What is the Ombud? It's the national equality body supporting people who feel discriminated against. So, as a so-called Gleichbehandlungsanwältin, which is Ombud for Equal Treatment, Cornelia gives advice, judicial advice to people who feel discriminated against on the grounds of sex or gender, ethnic origin, and all the other discriminations. And she also lectures in companies, in schools, in public institutions, and publishes in legal journals. Welcome to this panel, Cornelia. The third person I would like to introduce is Helena Hirze. Helena Hirze is a WU alumna. She graduated recently from this university, and she was at the ÖH, which is the student organization. She was head of the Student Equality Office there. Yeah. And where, among other things, her tasks were related to supporting female students, especially female, because we know that most sexual harassment is against women, but not exclusively. So, welcome Helena, and thank you for joining us. Then, unfortunately, we have one person who could not make it, who is ill since this morning, and that's a great pity. Sophie Rendel cannot join us. She is the founder of the women's domain Frauendomäne. And she is very much focused on all these questions surrounding the Me Too in art and culture. So it's a pity that she cannot be there, but we had a conversation with her and we have some of her ideas here. Then we have Esther Reiser, a journalist specializing in management and career at Die Presse, the journal. She studied psychology and communication in media studies at the University of Vienna, and we are very happy to have you here as a person from the press. Thank you very much. Last but not least, I would like to introduce Andrea Romo Perez, who is a part of our team here at the Institute for Gender and Diversity in Organizations, and is organizing a lot of events. We also have this event always in November, this Orange the World, which is this international event for, against violence against women. And we always have a panel, and you're very welcome to join that. We have a different topic every year, which we also continue usually in our conference. We have a conference every March, which is a very international conference on different topics. The topic that we had this year was, example, the body, embodiment, and that covered a lot of things. So we already have the date for next year, but we're still considering the topic, but we will let you know. So, shall we then maybe start with the first interventions?
Yes, so I would like to start inviting Ana Belén Amin to introduce the topic from her perspective, her professional perspective. Let's remember that she represents the Central European University and the project UNISAFE, and more recently, GenderSafe as well. So,
exactly.
The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the invitation, for having me here, for the introduction, and perfect pronunciation of my name, both of you. I'm here to share with you the main findings of the EU-funded UNISAFE project that ended this past January, and how we are now continuing these efforts in the GenderSafe project, launched in March, of which my university, CEU, is a part of. I want to clarify that I was in close contact with the UNISAFE team, but my university was not a partner in the consortium, so I don't take credit for their very hard work. But I would like to highlight two main areas of interest from the UNISAFE results. The first one related to prevalence of gender-based violence in higher education and research organizations, of which sexual harassment is only one form. The second area is related to the institutional responses to gender-based violence, meaning what these organizations are doing to address the problem in policy terms. First, then, on prevalence. UNISAFE recognizes 6 forms of gender-based violence: physical, sexual, psychological, economic, online violence, and sexual harassment. The survey they conducted in 46 institutions across 15 EU countries collected 42,000 responses from both staff and students and showed the scale of the problem. 62% of respondents report having experienced at least one form of gender-based violence in the context of their work and studies. 57% report at least one incident of psychological violence, 31% at least one incident of sexual harassment, and if we talk about people here, we're talking about 12,000 respondents. Economic, physical, and online violence are less frequent form of violence, below 10% of incidents. And finally, 3% of the respondents report having experienced at least one incident of sexual violence, which amounts to 1,000 respondents. As expected, respondents from minoritized groups, based on their gender identity, sexual orientation, ethnicity, or disability, were more likely affected. Women are disproportionately affected compared to men. This we knew from literature. However, the most vulnerable gender identity group is that of people who identify outside the gender binary. Now a bit on institutional responses. UNISAFE conceptualized institutional responses to address gender-based violence in the so-called 7P model. What are these Ps? Prevention, protection, prosecution, provision of services, partnerships, and policy, with the measure of prevalence at the core of the model. UNISAFE put together an inventory of organizational-level policies to address gender-based violence in 48 universities and research organizations, also in 15 countries. A total of 105 policy documents were analyzed. The good news is that most institutions have more than one relevant document addressing gender-based violence, whether in the form of a more general document, for example, a code of conduct, a mix of a general document and a document specifically focused on gender-based violence, or only gender-based violence-focused documents. Only 3 out of these 48 universities did not have any policies. But there are, of course, gaps and room for improvement. The term gender-based violence is used only in 10% of the institutional policies, and while some concrete forms of gender-based violence are mentioned, others are not. Sexual harassment is mentioned in 88% of the policies, closely followed by gender-based harassment and harassment based on multiple grounds of inequalities at 79%. Sexual violence is addressed in only 24% of the documents, and other types of gender-based violence are even more infrequently mentioned. Policies scarcely address intersectionality. That is mentioned only in 25% of the institutions, and only 1 in 3 institutions makes reference to budget allocation to combat gender-based violence. In terms of the 7 Ps, the most frequently mentioned are protection and prosecution, while prevalence and partnerships are often omitted. So, how do we take it from here? This is where the EU-funded Gender Safe project steps in to support research and higher education institutions in setting up comprehensive policies to effectively address gender-based violence that include attention to power dynamics and to intersectionality, mobility, and precarity. This will be done mainly by offering training on gender-based violence to responsible staff and officers, and by the establishment of a community of practice, or COP. This COP aims to engage institutions in an exchange on how to fill in the current gaps in institutional responses to gender-based violence, using a trauma-centered approach, addressing all forms of gender-based violence, and covering the 7P model conceptualized by UNICEF. The main goal is to develop a template policy framework using collaborative design tools and support organizations in tailoring such framework to their own national and institutional contexts. That's all I can share in my 5 minutes. I'm looking forward to hearing the interventions of my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the second speaker today is Cornelia Amon Conrad. I would like to open the floor for you to expose your wonderful expertise in this field.
Okay. Does everybody understand me? Okay, it's loud. Okay. I'm never speaking with such things, so. Okay. I've been invited here to speak from a legal point of view, and I will bore you to death now. No, I'm working at the Ombudsman for Equal Treatment. We are the national equality body. That's something the EU invented, and it should be a watchdog, and acting as a watchdog. We provide advice and support to people who feel discriminated against, and we also promote equality. This means we offer, for example, training for private companies that want to act preventively or that have been confronted very often with a case, and then they don't know what to do. And need support. When we support victims of discrimination, we are not allowed to go to court. We provide support through out-of-court settlements, but this gives us a little bit more flexibility when it comes to finding solutions. For example, if the person who has been discriminated against wants an apology, something very hard to get, or wants the management of the company to provide the training to prevent discrimination in the future, we try to negotiate this into a settlement. So it's not only damages, but it's also some action that has to be taken. Apart from that, we take cases to the Equal Treatment Commission. The Commission is a so-called soft law instrument, and the Commission's decisions are non-binding. But it's free of charge, and that it's a valuable alternative to costly court proceedings. It is important for me to state that the Austrian Federal Constitution does not simplify the situation regarding discrimination. We have several laws that protect against discrimination. The Bundesländer, the provinces, and the Bund, the Republic of Austria, have each their own anti-discrimination laws, sometimes 2 for one province. And public universities have their own systems, which refer to the Bundesgleichbehandlungsgesetz, but work with yet another set of institutions and instruments. You at the WU know that it's quite complicated. For private companies and their employees, that's the area I work in, the relevant legislation is the labor law and the Federal Equal Treatment Act. Why do I tell you that? Because from an individual's point of view, to fight sexual harassment is very often first and foremost about finding the right contact person, the correct procedure, and the correct Anti-Discrimination Act. And that's quite difficult. And when we talk about gaps in legislation, legal or practical obstacles and structural problems, this is one of them. So let's go to the practical side of things. What do I do if I'm confronted with sexual harassment at my workplace? This could be either because I am a victim or because I am in a management position and I'm asked by an employee to take action. That's not a very easy role. The legal perspective and jurisdiction are clear. Persons in an employer role, and mind you, legally, this could be the head chef in a kitchen or the deputy service manager, are responsible for taking action to prevent further sexual harassment. They also have to watch out for perpetrator-victim reversals, a common occurrence. They have to keep the rumors at bay, also rumors. And ideally, they come to a good resolution of the problem. This is often overwhelming and companies should act preventively. Put in place structures and procedures to deal with cases and establish codes of conduct, but not only on paper, but as guidelines for working together. I often get the impression that persons who are in management position do not get enough guidance and help in dealing with discrimination, and they do not have the knowledge. But they are the key actors for fighting discrimination and victimization in their working environment. So companies should focus on their training. We as an institution cannot support victims of sexual harassment or discrimination at universities. Nevertheless, there are persons who tell us their stories, and very often we get the impression that the system is quite complicated, that it is unclear who can take what kind of action, and especially with regard to disciplinary hearings, that the procedures are very often not victim-friendly. This leads to underreporting, and some employees decide to terminate their contracts and leave the university. Another point is that very often the perpetrators have a contract that cannot be easily terminated, and they have de facto power. And if you say to them, well, then you cannot work together with students anymore, I mean, teaching is not the cherry on top, very often when it comes to professors. So, okay. The EU level. One of the most important points from a European point of view is effectiveness. The EU wants its legal framework to work effectively. This is one of the reasons why there are equality bodies. They act as a watchdog in opposite governments and provide independent support to victims. They are there to ensure that the anti-discrimination legislation works. In the private sector, this has been done through our institution, but in the public sector, meaning the Bund, for example, such an institution does not exist. People who act there are not independent enough. And from an external point of view, this system should be revised in order to make it more effectively. So that was my intervention.
Thank you, Cornelia.
Very good.
Thank you, Cornelia. So now I would like to invite Helena Hiatzer. Let's remember that she's a WU alumna and also was the former equality officer representing ÖH here. So.
Thank you for the nice introduction. I'm very happy to participate in this WU Matters, WU Talks panel today about this very important topic. Yes, my name is Helen, and I got graduated a few months ago from VU, so it feels good to be back. Until last summer, I was the leader of the Student Equality Office at VU, known as ÖHBU. My tasks were very verified, with a primary focus on supporting female students in cases of sexual harassment. To raise the awareness of equality, public relation was also our important part of my work. For this, I wrote many articles for the VU student magazine called Steil. For this, I interviewed inspiring women, like a financial advisor who is specialized in the financial independence for women, and this is a so important topic for every one of us. Furthermore, I organized seminars and webinars about topics like empowerment, body awareness. This is very important for the future career of the students. And yes, in cases of sexual harassment, first of all, it is important to listen, then to talk, and finally to find a solution together. Fortunately, there were not so many cases during my period. There were typical cases like sexual comments in WhatsApp groups for a class or unfair treatment in a lesson. Also some in the private sector, like stalking. Together with the AKG Working Group for Equality, which exists mainly of VU profs, some of them are here today, Charlotte Kahn. We consulted on external equal treatment contexts and supported students in many ways. For me, it was also important to raise awareness of standing up for equal treatment. Everyone should know she or he is not alone with the situation and shouldn't be afraid of any consequences. Therefore, we distributed student flyers about measures against sexual harassment. Unfortunately, it is a fact that many women and girls are often reduced to their appearance. No women should be discriminated against because of her style, her look, her size. It doesn't care if you wear high heels and a skirt or a suit and sneakers at work. It's her body and it's her choice. And nobody should be called as bossy when she wants to make a career. We also need to break stereotypes in our society and make women visible in every field and sector. And the question, what can I take away from this time as the leader of the Student Equality Office? I think it's about girls and women are strong and successful in our society. It's not about making them stronger or more successful. It's about changing the way the world perceives them, because the future is female. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena. And last but not least, I would like to invite Esther Reiserer. She's a journalist specializing in career at the Presse. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for coming. So I'm not an expert on this topic specifically, but as I do work in the management and career department, all topics and questions about how do I get my employees to feel safe and secure are embedded in my department. For the research for this event, I've realized that there is, first of all, much more media coverage regarding specific cases instead of the structural problems. So, for example, the discrimination of women. Second of all, even quality media will use terms and words that like minimalize the importance of this topic. Thirdly, if there is a case that is like going public and the media covers it, then it can have severe consequences. And on the fourth part is that sexual harassment can really harm the economy as well.
Okay.
Thank you, Esther.
Thank you.
Bit shorter.
Shall we start with a question
Yeah.
for each?
Yeah.
Yes. We have been discussing, of course, the different contributions even beforehand, and we have a question for each of you, and then we will open the floor, and we have more general questions. So, Anna, there is a lot happening already, right? And there is a new project and a new EU project, and there are codes of conduct. And at this university, we have a fantastic brochure about Belästigung, yeah, Sag Nein zu Belästigung and so on. And we do have a code of conduct. And in spite of all that, people don't report. That's the #1 issue. And the question is actually, will it help if we have yet another code of conduct? Is there anything in that new code of conduct that would look a little bit more at sanctions, for example, and not just and prevention and sanctions because there's a kind of impunity, especially in university settings, I think, for the reasons that were mentioned before, etc. So, what would need to be done extra in that kind of EU project or document or whatever?
So very, very important question. I'm a policy person, but of course, it's what is on paper is not necessarily what happens in practice, and you can have a beautiful policy framework and nobody actually using it, nobody actually knowing about it. Just to drop some numbers here from the UNICEF survey, 50% of the respondents didn't even know that their organization had a code of conduct.
Yeah. Same here.
Yes, so you're not no exception, which means that, first of all, there's a lot of awareness raising to be made, like there is actually a code of conduct that you can go look into, and that has also a user-friendly approach, like brochures, that actually, connecting to Cornelia's intervention, that actually help the victim survivor navigate the system. So that's one of the biggest issues, the lack of awareness. The issue of underreporting, of course, is related to the lack of awareness that reporting is possible, but I find it really one of the most difficult things to tackle. So according to the survey, we're talking about 42,000 respondents here. The rate of reporting for students is 7%. So those who have taken their complaints to the university. For employees, 23%, which is still incredibly low. But 7%, I just find it really surprising in not the good way, not in a good way. So what I believe we can do, again, policy won't solve all of our issues. But I do believe that taking the UNICEF recommendations on reporting mechanisms can help improve this problem of underreporting. And one of them is to offer not only formal channels for filing complaints of harassment, sexual harassment, and gender-based violence, but also informal channels and anonymous channels. Many people fear retaliation, that's a big thing, but the #1 cause for not reporting, according to the survey, is not knowing if the incident was serious or severe enough to report, which means that we need a lot of education and a lot of work to do in the culture of the organization and once again, awareness raising of what sexual harassment and gender-based violence are. And one thing that the UNICEF project put a lot in the forefront is that there's a continuum of violence. So we all hear violence and sexual harassment and think of the most obvious, scandalous cases, but gender-based violence is a continuum. And if we manage to detect it at its origins, we can prevent it from escalating by offering the victims/survivors a chance to step forward without fearing consequences and without the weight of having to navigate sometimes extremely complicated formal procedures. Yeah. So that would be my 50 cents.
Very good. We will come back. I'm sure there will be more comments and questions.
Looking forward.
Yes, I'm sure. Thank you very much. So, Cornelia, I think your experience mostly in the private sector, and I understand that in the public sector, there's a kind of impunity, much more, right? Where it is much more difficult to report, to go to court, and to take it further, etc. So, in the present situation, what can we do as a university?
I wouldn't put it so generally that it's more difficult to get damages in the public sector. I wouldn't put it like that. I think that institutions are. I think it's more difficult to find the right people to go to and that support you. But it's difficult in the public and in the private sector. It's the same difficulty getting damages in front of a court. What I think would be good is to look at the structures and file for and fight for revision and to change a little bit to give them more independence when it comes to the Arbeitskreis für Gleichbehandlungsfragen, to give them more opportunities to act, to also determine what can we do if there is gender-based violence and sexual harassment, to make it easier to take consequences. But I would like to add something to Anna, because this was very interesting what you said about codes of conduct and about procedures. And what I see in the private sector is that HR very often tries to develop a system and a code of conduct together with employees and together with the management. And what they say is what works for our institution, what works for our company. What kind of procedures should we put into place so that management can act effectively? I think that's something good. And what they also do is that they talk about it in management meetings and in team meetings, and so you raise awareness and you make it known that you can go to somebody, you can file a complaint. It's been taken seriously. What I very often, but I also get the impression if there is a case and it's not handled well. If, for example, in the media, and if you see that there are negative consequences for the person who filed the case, then you have a massive setback.
Absolutely.
And that's really difficult then to overcome. So I'm not surprised about the figures, actually. So yeah, well, that's what I want to say.
Go ahead.
So to follow up exactly on what you said, Cornelia, about the role of the media, because we know that there are less serious media outlets that may be overexposing the victims, which can create a lot of different consequences for them in terms of their safety, in terms of their mental health, in terms of continuing or not with the process, the legal processes. But we also know that the media has this capacity to prolong the interest, the social interest in the topic, and to create some sort of pressure on the perpetrators, right? Or on the organizations that are supposed to help the victim or to reduce or to avoid any sort of situation in the future. So how to find this middle ground here between, I mean, these two situations, and how should the media act as per your perspective as a journalist?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a big question, and it's also kind of a difficult question. For me personally, there's always, like, you have to follow specific terms to be a good journalist, and that comes for every topic. So also you have to be very serious about this as well. In my personal experience, I've had very positive cases where it even led to the point that somebody trusted me as a journalist, and then I could stay in my distance, but have my investigation going. And then I reported about a case, and it even led to the point where the manager had to give up all of his functions. Or he didn't have to, but he realized that there's awareness and attention, and it probably it led to the point where he thought, okay, maybe I'm actually not the best person for this position. So it can, as I mentioned, and my colleagues as well, it can have severe consequences, which is good and bad as well. I think, moreover, the media has to inform and has to take their responsibility of forming opinion very seriously.
And to have let's say, to have the point of view of different experts on the subject, and
Exactly.
to be able to have a more holistic overview of the situation, you would say. And also, Elena, because you mentioned that you dealt with different issues, different reports on sexual harassment that occurred. I wanted to ask you how many exactly were there, and how do you escalate any sort of report that it's more serious to those individuals who are actually able to make decisions at the institutional level to avoid any sort of repetition in the future. So as a OJA representative, how do you escalate those serious reports, and how many of them were there when you were in charge, so to say?
Yes, so fortunately there were not so many. I'm very happy about this. That's good for the WU, that's good for our society. But it's important to listen to them. What is the problem? A lot of cases has our private factor, like our stalking, and then it's important to speak a lot with them about the problems. And my first question was always to ask them, what has to happen that you feel you better? What do you want that we will do? Because some people are afraid of consequences. So they say, no one should know it, or please don't go to a prof or so. So we have to keep it private, and that's very important for them, that they feel safe. It's a safe space, because then they can trust me better. And then when they want that we want to handle this and want to keep measures, then the AKG is a very important organ for this, because they have the contacts to the profs, to the departments, etc., because that's our profs. And so it's the connection between ÖHAR and AKG is a very, very important connection, and a strong connection. I'm very happy that the work was always really good and worked well. And so this is the important point, and yes, that's the most important.
Can I add something?
Yes.
Sorry. Just because you've mentioned it right now, I think it's a very important point. In this specific case that I've just been talking about, I didn't even know any names of the victims, so I've kept them totally anonymous. That needs to be assured.
Yeah.
But that's just a little add-on.
Yeah. because I think that's a problem. Many women, also men, are afraid of the consequences. Oh my God, then I can fire, or the university, it has negative impacts on my identification and so on. And that's, I can understand this absolutely. And so you have to build a trust between the person and yourself. Yes.
So I would like to ask something to all of you, because you may have different perspectives as to this, but all of you are working on this subject and are experts on this from different points of view. And something that you have been discussing is that we have to take care of the victim, how important it's to not to reveal their identity and other matters. So my question would be how to address the feeling of powerlessness, that are experienced by the victims and the witnesses of these cases. Because sometimes the cases, I don't know, Cornelia, since you are the legal expert here as well, some of these cases can be open, can be initiated by witnesses without the support of the victim. And is it possible or not at all? And how to address this feeling of powerlessness for those individuals who actually report any sort of sexual harassment situation?
It's a challenge.
Legally, you have witnesses are protected by at least in the private sector, by the Equal Treatment Act. Because there is a so-called victimization, it's a Benachteiligungsverbot, and if I act as a witness in court proceedings, then I must not be dismissed or otherwise victimized, and so on. Nevertheless, most of the witnesses who act as witnesses in front of the Equal Treatment Commission are former employees, I have to admit. But there are some strong characters who go there and say what was the case. When a case becomes public, and there are several cases right now that we hear from in the media, among others, one again, very, very prominent big company in Austria. If a case becomes public, it's very difficult for the woman who files this complaint to stay on this case, because very often, if you read the comments in the papers, it's like you are being traumatized again, because. And also some lawyers use the strategy of
Join
to accompany a case in the media strategically, if they give interviews or if they lance articles with some papers, they try to influence the public process and the process in front of the court. So. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. It can be good for the case, but very often it's not a good case for the woman who files a complaint. So, and for the witnesses as well. So, in a case I'm advising at the moment, I see it very clearly that the witnesses, one after another, leave my client and tend to say nothing. So that's a very difficult problem, actually.
Yeah, which probably increases this feeling of powerlessness.
Yes,
from the victim point of view, and probably for her or her legal representatives or his legal representatives as well.
Yeah. I think it's. Thank you for your thoughts, Cornelia, on this, and. Besides the things I mentioned before about having a user-friendly or survivor-friendly process, provision of services, accompanying the victim through the process, and so, For this powerlessness sentiment, I think it's very important what was mentioned before here by Marie-Thérèse on sanctions. Once again, bringing something from UNICEF about the phenomenon of underreporting, why people don't report. First of all, because they don't know if the incident was severe enough. But the third reason is because they don't think anything will happen as a consequence of the reporting. And this is where things get tricky, because at least in my experience, this is where the institution internal regulations meet the labor law. And some people are incredibly difficult to dismiss. And of course, in order to protect victims, in order to protect survivors, you can say, okay, you are not teaching anymore, you're not supervising anymore, which ends up being kind of a gift, because they receive their salary for 1/3 of their job, which is actually research, and is the job they are interested in doing. So you have, or you put the person on leave for a certain time while the investigation is ongoing, which means that this person is basically, we were paying for them not even working. So it looks like it's more like a present than an actual sanction. And then the fear of the institutions of going to court. So the fear of dismissing or putting a severe sanction on a perpetrator, and then having this brought to court. And generally, legal counsels in the universities tend to be very risk averse. So they will go for the strategy that brings the less exposure possible. For many reasons, some of them more justified than others. So here's where we have this difficult, let's say, confrontation between a trauma-centered approach, a survivor-centered approach, and the interests of the institution in terms of reputation, in terms of legal consequences. So I think that's where things start getting, at the level of sanctions, things start getting extremely tricky. Talking here about severe sanctions, right? Not just an apology or some rearrangement of academic duties, but major sanctions that start entering the field of labor law. So that's I think a big contributor to the helplessness of the victims, in that at the end of the day, nothing really happens.
Yes.
Can I just add one more thing?
Yeah, sure.
Because recently there was a decision by the Austrian Supreme Court in labor law where a worker who had been working for this factory since 1987 and who also had the status, had a special status because of his disability, he was dismissed, and he went to court. He filed a case. Saying that it was not
Justified.
It was not proportionate to dismiss him, because dismissal is a very strong reaction. Actually, it's the strongest reaction that you can have, terminating with a working contract. And he was a disabled person. But what did he do? He made comments to an intern about. Well, I won't repeat them, but there were sexually connected comments about going to the shower and so on and so on. And it was a very male-dominated factory, and the other men there, they did not laugh about his jokes. They said to him, "Stop it, she's only 18, stop it, please, no further." And he didn't stop it. He laughed, he kept harassing the 18-year-old. And she went, on one of her last days on the internship, she went to the management board and she said, "Look, this is happening, this is not okay. I don't feel safe here." And the management board, together with another colleague who supported her, and this is not this is not often done, that there is such a support, and the Works Council, they dismissed him. And the first instance and the second instance, they ruled in his favor, and then it came to the highest court. And the highest court said, well, you cannot simply say that because she is no longer an intern, she must not be, there is no need to protect her any longer because she will not be working together with him anymore. You also have to look out for the other employees. You also have to look out for future female co-workers. And you also have to take into account that it is not okay for him to say such things to an 18-year-old, even if he is disabled, because he should know better. And so they said it was okay to dismiss him. But I wonder, he was a worker. I wonder if it would have been the same for someone in a management position. And I think even more, if you are in a management position, there should be even higher standards because you should create a good space and a good work environment for the employees. You have certain powers and you should do that. But yeah, that's the interesting question after this decision.
Yeah. But I think you are touching upon a very important subject because with my students I've been able to discuss the situation at Tesla, which is publicly known with the sexual harassment that is rampant in some of the let's say, more blue-collar occupations at Tesla in the United States. And something that the women seem to be suggesting is that the leadership itself can seriously influence how empowered some of the perpetrators may feel to move forward with their sexual harassment. If they feel that the leadership is somehow going to defend the situation or is going to stay quiet about the situation, they would just do it and expect no sanctions. So I think the leadership plays a big role here. I mean, the managers, whoever is at the top in creating this feeling of being powerful in such position as a perpetrator,
In the private sector, it's in a way easier. You can have this policy of zero tolerance, as they say, right? And there are sanctions. If there are no sanctions, it means it's okay. And that is the problem. I think it's more difficult in the public sector because the sanctions are more difficult. But what if one university once gave an example? Would that, for example, change the situation for other universities? Would they have more courage or more, be stronger in this respect? Because we know that it is happening and we know that it's not reported and we know that it's covered up in a certain sense, you could say, because there's no talk about it. So you wonder sometimes what would happen if somebody, was more transparent and showing what can be the consequences, etc. But I think we should move maybe to the audience if there are any questions. There's somebody with a microphone over there. Oh, there are several questions. Yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
No, we cannot.
Okay.
Now.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for the interesting inputs and discussions. I would, however, like to challenge a little bit the assumption that necessarily a low number of reported cases of harassment is a good thing, connecting maybe also to what Anna said about all the underreporting. I think in many cases, what what is important is to have the courage for an organization or a company to be more comfortable with having a higher number of reported cases if these cases are happening in the first place. Of course, what you want to do is reduce the number of cases that occur, but you want to get the number of reported cases up. So I was wondering maybe if anyone on the panel has any ideas, suggestions, recommendations for how this perception can be changed. How can organizations be encouraged to come forward and say, look, we've had an increase in reported cases, but that shows maybe that our mechanisms of encouragement, of witness, of victim survivor protection are working. I just started a new job in a very male-dominated environment, and I was confronted exactly with that during my orientation. But we have such a low number of reported cases with a lot of pride. But how can these things be turned around? Do you have any good ideas, any encouragement for how to maybe challenge this perception? Thank you.
Does anybody want to answer that question? I think we had some elements already. There's a formal approach and there's this informal approach. And the informal approach, maybe we can expand a little bit on the informal approach.
Do you have good experiences with an informal approach?
Excellent, really excellent. It's at least in our university we had a policy on harassment that includes sexual harassment. With no informal mechanisms, or one that was really, not very well defined. We amended and created an ombuds network inside the university, taking informal complaints. And when we did the first assessment, so this was previous to the amendment of the policy, on how many records we had of sexual harassment complaints across the history of the university. There's not a very old university, that's 25 years, but still 25 years. We found zero records whatsoever. There was no paper with one line, although we knew informally that there were cases, I mean, rumors and so, but there was nothing. Since the moment we amended the policy with the informal mechanism, in addition to the formal mechanism, in 3 years, I think we hit around 80 complaints. Yeah. Doesn't mean here, again, I'm going back to the question because I think here the question was a little bit more nuanced, not so much how we increase the number of reports, but how do we change the narrative around reputational damage of doing what I'm doing right now. Yeah. Which is saying CEU had, in the past 3 years, 80 complaints filed, insgesamt, total. Totally. So both, both formal, formal and informal. Sorry, I'm learning German and sometimes it happens.
It's okay.
Doesn't mean that all these cases were, most of them were informal. I think more than half of them were settled in an amicable manner with agreement of both parties because they were caught at a low level of severity. So I'm not talking here about 80 cases of rape. I'm talking here about people feeling more encouraged to report those incidents that are the beginning, the beginning of something that doesn't feel quite right. And if you tackle that and you fix that, many times you have respondents who were not aware that what they were doing, so they correct their behavior. Not always the case. And sometimes, yes, you have very severe cases where we had a dismissal, for example. So I think the tricky part here of how to shift the narrative that what the institution should be taking pride in is not having reports, but having reports, because that's showing that you're doing your prevalence studies right, and that you're facing the problem, you're addressing the problem in the face. But this is something I believe that we have to do collectively, and this is where partnerships, the P of partnerships steps in. Because if I step, like I'm doing now, and saying, we have these numbers, and the rest of the universities, we're a private uni, the rest of the universities remain completely silent, then who on earth is going to enroll at Central European University thinking that this is a place that is catching fire in terms of sexual harassment? And that's definitely not the case. It is clearly not the case. On the contrary, I'm really happy about this amendment we made, and very soon we will have also an anonymous complaint mechanism through an online app. So I expect complaints to skyrocket there, which, yeah, I think that's the first step. And then we, of course, once we have really, really good levels of reporting, then we can take pride on, those levels of reporting going down. But I think now the pride is in increasing reporting that is extremely low, and in showing that those people who reported those complaints were taken seriously, and there was some sort of solution brought to the case. So that's what we can showcase. Oh, it's not just a complaint, but out of these 80 complaints, we had these sanctions, we had these solutions, we had these protection measures, etc. So not just throw the number in there. But I do think that, a little bit building on what was said before, we have to come out in universities en masse. Yes. We cannot just step outside alone and say, we have 90 cases, and then tomorrow CEU is on all of the papers. Which I hope is not going to be the case, or at least not in that light.
Thank you. Can we go to the next question? There was one there.
Thank you very much. I have just a couple of comments, and then I'm inviting more of an exchange here. So to begin with, I really appreciated all of your inputs and comments, but I did find certain topics missing, and I will explain. You mentioned at one point that there are code of conducts and there are documents existing in the organizations, but many people are not even aware that they are there. And I think in the responses to this, we missed a lot about participation. So who are the people that we are targeting with these documents? Are we sure that they understand what is actually in there? And are we sure that the document is what those people need it to be? So I feel that we need to highlight that the creation of every such document, a policy, to work, there has to be a consultation and a participatory element, be it public or private sector. And then maybe I just connect. We go on to the topic of awareness raising, and there we have to also make sure that the materials we create are applicable and understandable by the people who receive them. So particularly universities, we talk about youth, mostly youth, but we also have staff. So those are two different target groups. We cannot generalize. And the last topic, kind of rounding up all of this, is that we have to make sure that we have the human and financial resources so that the business can actually keep up with its commitments and obligations, which consequently builds trust. So those are just my comments, and then I invite whoever has something else to say. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, the code of conduct. I'm sure if you ask people at the university, the personnel, do you know that there is a code of conduct? They wouldn't even know, and nobody has read it. And maybe we should train people or give them, this information, make them sign it or something like that, like they do in companies sometimes. Yeah, it is an issue, yes, and that's a first step, of course. Yes. Any other comments on that? The code of conduct.
A short comment. Yes. I think that's very important what you have said, because therefore it's so important PR work, because so you can raise the awareness of code of conduct and so on. Because therefore I wrote so many articles in style, because it's so important that students know, okay, when I have a problem, then with who can I speak, which equal treatment contacts are there, because that's the fundament for for the result.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, thank you. There were other questions. Several. I think there was first, and then you were as well, and then yes. Oh, yes, I meant the
Thank
other
you.
one,
My name is Franz Heidinger, and I'm a practicing lawyer here in Vienna, apart from other things. But I just want to report on 20 years of practice in the field of anti-discrimination law, and I would like to address some of the points that you have raised. Before I do that, let me thank you all for very inspiring presentations and very inspiring interventions. First, to the observation, the distinction between public and private. I would very much support what Cornelia has said. Very often, when it comes to a dispute resorting to the public sector, there's more of an opportunity to get compensation, to get damages, and to get your right affirmed. So it's not always the case that the private sector would work more smoothly. The second thing is coming back to your discussion of codes of conduct and manuals. It is my experience, and I think I've had cases against the largest banks in this country, against largest institutions also in the public sector, cities, and so on and so forth. But usually when you turn to those opponents, you would come up with a manual of 200, 300, 400 pages. So it's all there. And my humble experience would be the more sophisticated the manuals and the more sophisticated the codes of conduct, the more sophisticated the discrimination will be. So there is no necessary correlation between having those codes of conduct and an actual change in behavior. I think it's all a question of actual management and of learning from and implementing those things. So it's not just the paper it's written on, but it needs to be the culture. And all of this just ties into what you have said. Another thing that I would like to also confirm what you said, Cornelia, about the observations. I think our courts, when it comes to going to court and representing especially female clients in a discrimination case, our courts are often ill-equipped, and you just don't get justice. You don't get justice done. So I'm afraid that is my experience after 20 years of work in this field. There are many things that could be improved and should be improved when it comes to that. And very often I see my clients, they're just not capable of going through this ordeal and standing there for 2 years, 3 years, all the way up to the Supreme Court. They will simply go up. They will simply give up, and they will simply collapse because they can't afford it. They're not in a physical condition, not in a psychological condition to do it. So those are observations where I think we need change. So luckily we have you as the ombud, so we can seek alternative routes. But when it comes to court work, I, as a petitioner, often tell my clients, do not get involved. It is too complicated, it's too costly. Don't go for that, because it might be terrible for you, a terrible experience. And the last thing, or another thing, coming to you, Anna, is you mentioned the intersection between, the factual problem and labor law. That's just one side, because we have to always think of civil law. We have to think of, reputational issues. We have to think of media law, and we have to think of criminal law. And in recent years, the number of cases that I have been working on have really focused, especially when you represent those who have been, alleged of having committed, the alleged perpetrators. They also have rights. And as a lawyer, you need to think about their rights also. So, and we need to come up with a system that allows a balanced approach so that both parties can be heard. And if we simply resort to informal ways of dealing with the matter, it may get very, very difficult, because then rumors might, take over, and it might be very difficult for a person to get justice and defend him or herself. So that's just another thing that I wanted to mention. And speaking about those cultural differences, I guess that is the most recent trend. And you mentioned the universities, Marie-Thérèse. Obviously, when we look at the differences between your university and international university, local universities, and let's say, the US average tradition with Title IX offices and so on and so forth, we have had cases, and I represented a number of cases involving international staff and people seconded to other countries and coming from different backgrounds. And the number of issues that pop up there are just without end. It's just incredible how difficult it is. Let's just think about, an allegation of, let's say, rape. The definition of rape is different from country to country. And when you get to the point where, an informal, quasi-formalized finding from a Title IX officer has found that somebody had committed rape, it may be something completely different compared to what we would understand by the term of rape. Okay, so only a yes is a yes, and all those concepts which are different. So enough said. I just wanted to point out this cultural difference, or these cultural differences, which are really, really important. And for a practitioner, for a legal practitioner who has to represent either one of the parties, it's not easy. So that's just another complicated aspect to this discussion. Thank you.
I would fully agree with you that the societal culture and not being Austrian and seeing what the culture is here and the contrasts, it's sometimes shocking actually how different it can be, what the societal culture, the role of this societal culture has, etc. But we had more questions. Yes, please.
Thank you a lot for this very interesting discussion. I have two comments, and by my experience, I'm for 24 years a compliance officer in the private sector, so very long. What is really effective is tone from the top and tone from the middle. Tone from the top, if the top management or the top of the organization say, yes, it's important for me personally, and I do not accept such cases, then the cases will increase because the employees knows, yes, they have the commitment of the top management. And what is even more important on a cultural side is the communication of the middle management, of the direct managers of the employees, because they can create an environment of psychological safety, so that people really can speak up. And a last comment, unfortunately, we fight hard for it, but it was not possible to get it in the Whistleblower Protection Act. We have no whistleblower protection in this act for all HR items. So it would be a good sign that we say, yes, it is important to protect such whistleblowers also in these points, and not only, it's also important in corruption items, but also in all these items of mobbing, of sexual harassment, and so on. And we know from statistics, worldwide statistics of Speak Up, that these HR topics are the most. It's not about the anti-corruption or antitrust or sanction or whatever, what are the classical compliance issues. The most speak up items are in the HR sector. Thank you.
Yeah. Any comments on that? No? No?
Well, in my experience, when dealing with companies who have, where they say you can report anonymously, and also on HR and sexual harassment cases, most of them have no cases. It's not used. Because very often it's difficult to report somebody when somebody has been sexually harassed, and it's from an HR point of view. I mean, you cannot take action, actually, because you have to confront somebody with what he or she has done. You said somebody has reported anonymously that you have sexually harassed somebody else. Okay, that's very, from an HR perspective and from a labor law perspective, I think this is very difficult. We fought against being included into the Whistleblowing Act because we said, no, it has to be, that's why, I mean, informal ways, okay, and having an ombud and having people then installed that can do something and can act on it, but totally anonymously, well, I don't agree. I'm sorry, I don't agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have increased the cases by
I see the point. I agree to disagree. That's good. Of course,
it's good. That's why we're here.
Yeah, of course. What you can do with an anonymous complaint, it's way less than what you can do with other types of complaints. In the university environment, I still think, first of all, that it can serve, even if you cannot do anything, because you risk exposing the person who made the complaint, or you have no way of presenting evidence to the alleged perpetrator. I think it's good as a sort of flag system that, okay, in the political science department, there's something going on, because in the past month, we've had X amount of anonymous complaints. Let's do some training. So you don't grab the alleged perpetrator by the hair and dismiss this person. Clearly, that's not the type of intervention that you can do from an anonymous complaint or from several, but you can do some, let's do some training, see what's like some sort of measure of this sort. Then it can also happen, because this is a question that comes up very frequently. Oh, what are you going to do with your anonymous reporting system? You cannot do anything. You cannot investigate, etc. And sometimes it does happen that there's a way of confronting the alleged perpetrator if the amount of complaints, so in our system, complaints get clustered. When they mention the same person, the app clusters the complaints. And if there's an entire class or 10 people complaining about one single person, you don't risk exposing the victims when you approach this person and say, look, there has been in several of your courses, we've been receiving this complaint about X comments that you're making, such as such and such. Please be aware that this is against our code of conduct and could potentially have consequences if any of these people decide to bring it forward as a formal complaint. So our anonymous complaint mechanism doesn't trigger investigative procedure, doesn't trigger sanctions. You cannot do that. But I think there's some things that you can do with this system that is still of value. Although I completely agree with you that you have much more limitations in what you can actually do as a response to anonymous complaints. But I'm still for it. But we'll report in a couple of months to see how, after the app is launched, how it actually worked.
Please do.
We'll do.
I would agree that the first thing you need is data. You need data, otherwise you cannot take any measure. Yes, but there was another question there. Yes, please.
Thank you for this important discussion. I have a question because you mentioned that the Ombuds for Equal Treatment is not responsible for students at public universities because there's the Bundesgleichbehandlungsgesetz, but there's the Arbeitskreis für Gleichbehandlungsfragen at every public university. However, there are students who are afraid to go to a body that is affiliated with the institution they had the problems with. So I wonder, are there institutions that are not affiliated with the universities where students can turn to, or do we need such an institution that is not affiliated to the university?
Should I answer? Well, I think the most important thing is to have an independent organization that is not in the reporting system to the head of the university. I think that would be good, and to let them have resources and let them have a clear mandate. I think a clear mandate is something that is very important. But apart from that, I'm not a member of the university. I would like to hand over the question to you.
Yes, because therefore we have the Student Equality Office, because it's not enough to have our work group for equality. We want to have a Student Equality Office because the barrier is not so high to go to a student at your age as to go to your professor or so on. That's very important. Yeah. 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 Thank you. It's in the
Okay, I think we're running out of time. So
she's the expert.
Thank you very much, Anna, Cornelia, and Esther, and Elena. And thank you all for being here tonight, and in spite of the good weather and the cocktail bar outside. And thank you very much. Thank you. I think there's a lot of work to be done still.
Absolutely.
There's this report that was published yesterday by the FRA, which is the European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights, published 14th of May. Harassment and violence against LGBTQI people is on the rise. So there is a lot of work, and we are mostly talking about women here and etc. But we should not forget that men are also harassed, and that LGBTQ people are even more harassed.
Or the intersections, and how
exactly.
vulnerable minorities in terms of language, migrant status, and of course being part of the LGBTI plus community, among other things, or dimensions of diversity are,
Yeah. All right, well, thank you very much. Thank you, panel.